I think we'll start off today, this little question and answer session we've got in relation to today's action. Um, in just a few minutes, we're going to leave a couple minutes for some more people to join. But we'll start this out with a little explainer and kind of guide you all through where we are right now and how we got here. And then we will open the floor up to some of your questions too. We want to help clear up any confusion that may be out there. All right. Well, we've got about 33. I feel like we can get started a little bit just at the very beginning here. Chris and Bob, why don't you walk us through where we are now with our official guidance as a city and our official response on COVID-19, and how did we get here to where we are?
Sure. Well, the most important guidance is simple and straightforward. That is to stay at home, to leave your home only to get your very basic needs met in terms of groceries or pharmaceuticals or the like, or to provide essential services through an essential business or essential service provider. Otherwise, stay home. And when you do leave your home, take every precaution and be especially mindful of the CDC guidelines about social distancing. That means stay in groups, don't be in groups of any size. Avoid groups. Secondly, that means maintain a reasonable distance of separation. 6 feet is the commonly referred figure of distance of separation, and to make every effort to even when you're on a essential activity, minimize the time that you're out, and be efficient and mindful of others. I think the basic, the most effective framework is based on our understanding that the virus can be transferred before symptoms emerge. We should all behave as if we're currently unknowingly carrying the virus, and instead of behaving as if you don't want to get it, which is of course a wise thing to do as well, behave as if you've already got it and could communicate it should you violate the social distancing practices. So that's what that's what we expect folks to be doing in Spartanburg, and we know that's difficult. We know it is complex and frustrating and difficult to achieve, but the great majority of folks are, and we expect that to continue for the weeks that we must be on this path.
Christopher, if it helps, I'll give you a little legal background to how we got to where we are in the states, what other states have done, if that helps.
Please do.
Sure. So the concept of shelter in place or stay at home originated, I think, generally with emergencies, tornadoes, riots, active shooters. And the notion was everybody shelters in place till the threat passes. There's never, to my knowledge, been a stay-at-home directive or a shelter-in-place directive for a pandemic, because you're asking people to stay for weeks on end. But the concept began gaining momentum across the country, and the states that have enacted stay-at-home ordinances or state law have come at it all from one direction. They've all decided that you are directed to stay home unless you need to go out for an essential service, either to participate by buying or providing. And then they went and tried to, identify each and every essential service, and the list became increasingly longer, more complicated, and added more questions. I think something like 33 states have enacted some form of that. Last week, or earlier this week, our governor enacted. He took a different approach. If you look at his executive order, it's not a shelter in place. It's not a stay at home. What he did was close places that they deemed were problematic or hotspots. And the theory is if they're closed, people have nowhere else to go but to stay. So there's no order in the state to stay home. There's a request to stay home, and there's an order closing things that are not essential, and therefore people can't go to those places, so they should stay home. The essential things are still open, so they go to those. So I think it's important to understand that that's the direction that our state came at it from. It's a little different than the other ones, but I think it gets to the same place. They both leave open essential places, and people aren't allowed or don't have any place to go unless they're going to an essential place. So what we decided, all of our council members were anxious to get off the sidelines and get involved and do what we could do. We decided to take the measures the governor gave us and run with those. Mm-hmm. And critically, everybody recognizes, as Chris said, social distances and small groups. And one of the measures the governor has given local authorities is to disperse groups. You can't be in a group of more than 3. If that happens, obviously by dispersing that, you create a social distance. If people are violating social distance, they're in groups. And so it feeds off each other. Right. So the ordinance today, and you may want to get into it more, was an attempt to run with, to expand upon, to use the measures that were given to us by the state to keep the people in Spartanburg safe, but obviously everybody, because this pandemic knows no boundaries. I'll be glad to talk about the authority of local authorities to act when the state authority is act, if you want to get into that some more as well.
I definitely do want to get into that too. I think, so when we're talking about coming at it at a different angle from the state perspective, from government master, functionally, how does a shelter in place different from where we are with this executive order? It's to your point about it just coming from different angles. It's not really functionally that different, is it?
Correct.
Well, this is kind of in the this is deep into the weeds of the public policy discussion, but it's important for folks to understand that any order or directive or ordinance or regulation or law finds its compliance is related to when the governmental body intervenes to alter behavior through an enforcement action. Yeah. We are very much encouraging folks to stay at home, and we are going to direct our law enforcement resources towards the behaviors we think are most dangerous, which is the group dynamics. I know of no South Carolina jurisdiction that is doing more than that. There were a couple jurisdictions that adopted what they labeled as stay-at-home orders before the governor's last 2 executive orders. Those last 2 executive orders and the Attorney General's opinion about the relationship between the state and local government came after Columbia and Charleston's quote-unquote stay-at-home orders. And we could all get deep into the semantic terms associated with it. But the reality is, in all jurisdictions, there is some movement of people through the streets and of the community to engage in and procure essential services and provide essential services. That's happening throughout the state, irrespective of what local actions have been taken, and we expect that to continue to a limited degree here as well after today's action. So I'm not so sure ultimately how productive the semantic
Sure.
discussion ought to be because of the fact that the governor has made clear which businesses must cease operations. And he's made clear what kind of interpersonal behavior ought to cease, and what types of movement about the city are legally authorized. And we intend to adhere to those, and they're frankly the same as are occurring today in Columbia and Charleston and everywhere else. So.
Right, and that was kind of what I wanted to get at there. Is like I know it is that semantical difference. I think that's what some people I've heard from, and we've heard from on our Facebook and other places. They're getting caught up on what I think is that semantical difference and not actually understanding that functionally it's the same kind of effect. Closing the businesses, the only real difference is the terminology. And that
Right.
Columbia and Charleston and the other places that our residents would like us to look to for an ordinance like this are in fact the places we did look in crafting this one. Isn't that right, Bob? I mean, in crafting this ordinance, didn't you take a look at our peer communities?
Absolutely. Yeah, we did that. And to state it another way, which you've done more articulate than I can, but you're right. What is the difference between telling people you must stay home except for going to an essential service, or closing the non-essential services? The outcome's the exact same. And so, there's going to be a debate over what's an essential service or not. But yes, we looked at what the governor had deemed essential. We looked at the hot spots and the problems, and then we looked at an opportunity to address those
right
across the city.
Okay.
And I think the searching along those lines probably relates to broader concern of, are we doing everything we can and as much as we can to safeguard the community? That's the answer we're all searching for. So if folks are drawn to the stay-at-home language, or pick your own terms, and encourage your friends and family. And if you think the governor's got the wrong definition of what is an essential business, don't go to the other businesses, and encourage them to err on the side of caution of what's essential and what's not.
Right.
In other words, there's a collective decision making that is taking place as we speak across every community in the country about how safe each community makes itself by virtue of its own, by the choices of the people who reside there.
Yeah, and I think too, it's also important right now that we talk about what we can't do. I understand that people are out, they're seeing gatherings of people on private property. We had a council member mention house parties. I know other people have talked about that sort of thing. These are areas where we just simply don't have any authority to disperse, correct?
Well, there are limits to certainly what we can do on private property. We are engaged in what I think is best described as coaching folks, and that has worked very, very well so far. In fact, our officers don't report of a single instance where a business has come back and said, well, show me the letter of the law, when they've been given advice about how to keep their friends and family and customers safer. There are some residences that you're unlikely to see us go inside private residences and count the number of persons present. that is a
Right.
step that we're don't envision taking. But at the same time, when we encounter crowds, we will do our best to encourage them to disperse.
Yeah. And then, so the essential businesses, what's deemed essential versus what's not deemed essential. These lists, from what I have looked at across our state and a lot of other states, especially in our region, um, we're pretty well in line with what we consider essential and what they consider essential, correct? I mean, this is a list. I've seen different versions of it, but we're not wildly out of line in that regard, are we?
No, I agree with you, Christopher. I think an essential service is anything that provides one of life's necessities. And
Mm.
I mean, those are the things that have to stay open.
Yeah.
People just have to be smart about how they interact with those essential services.
Yeah. And
The
oh, good.
it's very clear, and this is not a it's not terribly productive to debate the definition of essential and what lists are considered essential or non-essential when the governor has explicitly directed it. And that's the way South Carolina law works. And I know that sounds like a bureaucrat giving a bureaucratic answer, but the alternative is to add complexity and difficulty and embark on tasks that don't make anyone any healthier, that just result in court complications about jurisdictional authority that don't serve the interest of anyone involved.
Sure. And I think that's where a lot of this confusion kind of comes from. This is new territory for everyone. We should point out too, this is obviously very new territory for us as well, and governments around the country. And I think that's in part why there's a lot of confusion about what is an essential business, what isn't, where you can go, where you can't go, what stay at home means, what all of this stuff means. And I think what we're trying to do right now is to be clear with you about what our definition of things mean, and also to point out that what we're doing is not out of line with what you're seeing other communities do, and that a lot of the things that people are calling for are actually things that we are doing. So I want to try and drive that home. So looking at a couple of questions that we're getting on Facebook right now, I've got a couple of questions about larger stores, and these are things that are on the essentials list, right? And there are things like, people are asking, why can't you limit the number of people who go in? Some stores are already voluntarily doing that. I think I'd speak for all of us and everybody else in government everywhere if I said that we'd encourage them to do that.
Absolutely.
But why do we not empowered, I should say, to get into the weeds about limiting number of people who are in a store at a given time, or limiting number of parking spaces, or anything like that right now?
I'll take this one briefly, Chris, or if you
Sure.
want to jump in. I think that's precisely what our ordinance this morning does. We looked at, as I said, one of the most useful measures that the governor has enacted is 3 persons. And that says anywhere except for in somebody's home. We don't like that term, in somebody's home, because somebody could have a house party. But if they're foolish enough to do that we can't prohibit that. But we've enacted and we've empowered our officers. We don't want to do that, but if they need to, they can go into a retail establishment, into a restaurant, and if that retail establishment is not taking reasonable measures to promote social distancing and to discourage or prohibit groups of 3, we have the power to act. And so we hope people will act on their own. But that ordinance, I think that's an important step of our ordinance this morning, was that to remind folks, we don't want to, but if we have to, we can engage in that. And I agree with you. It is a clothing store an essential service? we can argue that all day long. Some people would tell you, I've got to have work boots to go to work. I've got to have shoes to go to work in the hospital. I've got to have scrubs or gown. So, you know, we get caught it. But if they're going to go in, we are encouraging them to do the things the CDC knows prevent the spread: distancing and no groups.
And as I mentioned this morning, I think there may be, you know, one of the dynamics associated with this is those of us who are adhering to the guidance, which is the vast majority of people in the city are adhering to the guidance, aren't going into these stores to assess. You know, if you're behaving appropriately and minimizing your trips and only pursuing what is essential, then it's very unlikely that you know what's happening in the retailers that you personally don't consider essential, right? Because you wouldn't be there. And so we have a good bit of speculation going on. Most of the questions that we have seen to date relate to big box retailers, and there are the big box retailers like Walmart. Well, their leadership has been proactive and clear and has reached out to the city this week, and I've spoken directly with a member of their senior team about steps they're continuing to take, and they are very concerned about their own employees and their well-being and that type of thing, and they are attempting to protect health as best they possibly can, and asking for the help of their customers in that as well. But they do sell essential products, and in every list of essential businesses that I've seen, your large, your Home Depot and Lowe's have been included because the construction industry has been deemed as an essential activity in all of the jurisdictions that have gone that particular route in regard to modifying behavior. So it's a situation where there might have been, there likely was more than we would have liked of, you know, what you might call weekend warrior visits to Home Depot and Lowe's over this past weekend, because the weather was nice and people had some time on their hands and at home and were tending to some household projects. But that's not consistent with the encouragement to only venture out for what's essential. And so we're all part of that equation, and we will continue to work directly with them. We've visited over 75 businesses in the last couple of days. That number is probably much higher now since I last got a count. It's been over 24 hours. And those visits have often found responsible behavior, responsible activity, careful activity. But when that wasn't the case, they found willing management agreeable to making the improvements.
Right. Yeah, I've heard a lot about those big boxes too, and my response to that was typically, I wouldn't know. I haven't been by any of them because I've been at home. Yeah. So one other question I've got here on a specific thing, and then I think and then we'll move on. Someone is asking about our bus service, which we have made some changes to Sparta, where our passengers enter from the rear and bus fares are suspended. So there are people asking why we're still running our Sparta transit system. Why did we make the fares free? That sort of thing. So why did we do that?
We made the fares free for two reasons. One is for the health and safety of the drivers, so that they did not have to exchange cards and cash with the riders, and therefore suffer increased risk of surface communication of the virus. That's the same logic that, remember early on, one of the first steps we were all advised to take is to quit shaking hands.
Yep.
So that's a similar manifestation of that logic. The second reason is because of the economic impact of the coronavirus. It has pushed a number of households to the precipice financially, because folks have lost hours, lost work, that type of thing. And so maybe there's a benefit to a little bit of financial relief for those. But while we keep it open, and ridership is down, fewer people are going out and about because of the guidance that they've received from us and dozens of other sources about staying at home. Ridership is down, but it's important for the public to understand that the lion's share of our Sparta riders that is their sole and only transportation option. So if they have health needs, if they have needs for food and other, and their prescriptions and other things, for a great many of them, the bus is the only avenue to getting those needs met. So it is very much in keeping with the notion of what is an essential activity to undertake. We are glad, frankly, to see that ridership is down, because that means folks are staying home. But we don't envision stopping the bus service when we know it is a very critical question for a number of folks.
Yeah, what you hit on right there, that if we shut off bus service, there are a number of people in our community who just simply would not have any means of getting anywhere, even to, a doctor's office or things like that. So I think, got a question here. What can the city do to help secure closed businesses and restaurant sites? References there were thefts after tornado and things like that. Are our officers paying special mind to any, our restaurants and things that are closed?
One of the good things is that as there's less activity out and about in the community, there's been a modest decrease in calls for service from police officers. Some changes within the nature of the calls for services too, because more folks are home. There've been more calls that way. But no, our police team is very keenly aware of the fact that behavior patterns have changed, and they need to change accordingly. So far, there have been very few incidences that speak to that concern, but that doesn't mean we'll be lucky enough to avoid them completely. But our police leadership is very attuned to what new risks this presents.
Right. I had one thing, a point I wanted to make here too. I think maybe first though, we ought to go through one more time what we are empowered to do. People want us to be able to, disperse gatherings. We can do that. As a matter of fact, we have a hotline that you can call if you see one of these gatherings that's, taking place in, maybe it's in one of our parks, maybe it's, in a place where it's not authorized. You can call the hotline number, and I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to pull it up. It is 864-594-7208, or you can email socialdistancing@cityofspartanburg.org, and we will take those calls, and we'll take them seriously, and we'll show up, and we'll do what we're supposed to do. And our officers are also, we are very much in touch with the big box stores, and we're very much concerned with large crowds there. I think all of us on an individual level and as a city, we're concerned with that. And all of the other things that we've done and that the state is doing, you can go to our website, cityofspartanburg.org/coronavirus. That is where we store all of this information. It's all there and available to you. And above all else, we just continue to echo those pleas as individuals to stay home if at all possible. Stay home as much as you can. Only travel for essential services, truly essential services. Do you need to make this trip? If the answer is no, do not make it. I think I don't mean to laugh. That's where we are. Guys, is there anything else we need to cover right now? You think people need to hear?
Well, no, but certainly if there are questions, I mean, one of the things we're trying to do in this process is be as fully transparent as we can be in this. Frankly, there is no precedent for a lot of what we're going through, not just us, but the country. And different places are behaving slightly differently about it, and that's okay. And it's also important to recognize that reasonable people can disagree and both, be reasonable and responsible and disagree on exactly what should be done by whom and when. And that's okay too. We ought to be able to work through those and find our right responses. But frankly, this is one of these incidences that there is certainly nothing at the state and local level that could be done simply or easily that relieves citizens of their own burden of good judgment during this. Every household, every individual has to accept his or her responsibility for making choices that are in line with the guidance to protect the health, not just of their own households, but of their whole community. And I sure would like to think that in the long term, we take away a good bit of positive from that, to know that it's what will determine whether we fare well in a relative sense during this process or don't, is not a decision that'll be made in any local government space. It'll be a decision that is made between the ears of every resident, and whether they adhere to the guidance and whether they alter their life and their lifestyle to minimize the spread. And that, that comes from someone whose career is in trying to be effective through the means of local government. So please understand that is, that's just the reality of the situation. And I'm grateful for the great many folks that are engaged in this issue, and I saw that we had, 6,000 and some eyes on the meeting this morning.
Yes.
Is that correct, Christopher?
It is. It's our most watched live stream so far.
and that's terrific. Folks are engaged in this, and I think the concern or the energy that motivated them to click on that live stream this morning, and perhaps even some that have clicked on this afternoon, translate that energy into encouraging your friends, your family, your neighbors, those that you do business with, those that you interact with in any way, worship with or the like, to take every responsible step that they can take. And we're seeing that all over Spartanburg. This is a resilient, smart place full of resilient and smart and responsible people, and I think that's the trend line we're on.
Yeah. I think thinking about it from a local government perspective, which I'm inclined to do, to, I don't think I'm quite the deep level bureaucrat that you are, but I'm close.
That's all right.
But
You got time.
thinking about this, in that I do, but thinking about this, there are a limited number of levers that we can pull on to influence individual behavior and individual movement as a government. I think that's true of government at every level, particularly in the United States, but it's especially true of local government, I believe. But so we resort to trying to influence you as individuals, as people, because ultimately it comes down to your choices, not our choices. And, you know, I just want everybody to, I want to reiterate that. I know we keep reiterating it. I want to keep on. We can save ourselves from this thing together is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And we want you to know that, you know, I think we're making evident by this, this live conversation and by the other steps the council has taken to transparently and openly discuss some of these things that it's a participatory government and it's a participatory process, and the coronavirus response has to be maximum every household participation.
Yes. Well, I guess not seeing any more questions here that we really need to get to, and I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. But I want to say before we go, this little question and answer session is by no means the only time we will answer questions from you if you have them. All three of us are on the city website. There's also a contact form on the city website. You can send us a Facebook message. If you have a question about gatherings, any aspect of this at all, reach out. We will answer your question. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does. We want to be responsive to you throughout this.
That's well said. And I shouldn't have the last word, but I'll jump in there just to give people a glimpse into my thought process. So, and I'm all ears. If anybody's got an idea, email me. But here's an example. So people, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but people keep talking about a stay-at-home, a shelter-in-place. So think about that. The ultimate shelter-in-place is everybody stays home. Nobody's on the streets. Of course, you begin to walk that back because people go out for essential services. People go out for food. People go out for medicine. People go out for the clothing they need to perform a job. People go out to provide essential services. So when you look at that, you kind of get to where we are now. That is where we are. But if somebody's got, and people will abuse that. So, some people will go out and think what they need is essential and it's not, but we can't close the essential provider because it may get abused. That's where we'll step in with some enforcement guidelines and some coaching guidelines on social distancing. But if you've got an idea or a thought, email me. This is new for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Thanks, guys, for taking time out of your days to sit down and do this. And I know people will be hearing more information from us as the days and weeks progress. But I wanted to get this out there and make sure that we're on record after today's meeting explaining what happened today for folks. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you. Have a good day.